What if you were to step outside of repetition compulsion and completely transform your life? For those that don't know what repetition compulsion is, we'll dive a little bit into Freudian psychology. This is a structure that helps us understand that whatever it was, whatever dynamics emotionally that we experienced in childhood, we subconsciously and unconsciously on autopilot keep that alive in adulthood. It's comfortable and familiar, right? Whatever it is in childhood that we experienced that was comfortable and familiar as a dynamic emotionally, we unconsciously and subconsciously, through everything that we do, work to keep that alive, right? So, for instance, if your childhood was severely traumatizing, specifically in the sense of relationships, which usually tends to be the case, right? Through the act of repetition compulsion, you will actually seek friends and partners that reflect that childhood dynamic. Isn't that wild? Right? So, say for instance, if the idea of love in childhood was painful, you may end up actually developing sadomasochistic dynamics that later on in adulthood reflect that dynamic in childhood, right? Which, by the way, you might find yourself in, whether platonic or romantic, relationships that are actually painful. Maybe they consist of enmeshment, for instance. Enmeshment is an exceedingly painful dynamic in any relationship, right? You might find yourself attracting friends or partners that are abusive, right? And the fascinating thing about this is that the comfort and familiarity of the dynamic tend to keep us trapped inside of it because we tend to live based on what it is that was comfortable and familiar from yesterday, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, however long ago, right? But the even more fascinating thing about this entire dynamic is that we don't have to. The more aware we become of it, the more we can actually consciously choose different, right? We're going to continue to choose the same as long as it's not healed within us, right? If you believe that you deserve to be treated like shit in relationships because that's what your childhood spelled out very clearly for you in whatever abusive dynamics you learned from maybe parents, from friends, whatever it was, right? You're going to continue to repeat that. That's what repetition compulsion shows us. That is only until that is healed, right? When you heal it and when you actually see it for what it is and you're like, oh, wait a second, I've been attracting people that have treated me like shit because my childhood was intensely traumatizing and fucked up, exceedingly beyond the fucking ceiling, right? If your relationships look like a fucking war zone in adulthood, it is highly likely that your childhood was a fucking war zone. And in adulthood, you're just attracting based on that. And not only that, but you're also attracted to it, right? You're attracting people because of your energy based on that. And you're also attracted to it. Oh, this is what love is. Love is a fucking war zone where we constantly have issues and we constantly argue. Based on childhood, yes. Based on healthy love, no. Not even remotely close to it. So, how wild is it that you actually have free human agency that you might not realize you do because you were raised in these dynamics in childhood that lacked autonomy? If you were raised in systems of enmeshment earlier on in childhood, you did not learn autonomy. No, no, no. You learned that you were a part of this glob of a mass, of a family unit, where you didn't get to have your own sense of individuality. You had to be sucked into their emotional turmoil and that fucked up dysfunctional nature, right? And so with that, you actually learn to be highly tuned into other people's energies and to feel safe in caretaking them. That's the only way that you could feel safe. But it really wasn't safe because how did that feel? Probably anxiety ridden, depressive, right? That wasn't fun. That wasn't lovely. That wasn't peaceful. That wasn't relaxing. It is absolutely wild to me that somebody could learn love in chaos, that somebody could learn love in pain and actually seek out. It's totally valid. I'm not invalidating anybody here. It's totally valid. People actually learned to be attracted to dynamics where love was associated with pain, where love was associated with chaos. That's why you see dynamics in people in relationships where everything is just chaotic. It's a fucking war zone. There are constant arguments. There's constant fighting. They learned that from mom and dad. Oh, this is the way that love is supposed to be, so I'm going to be attracted to somebody that model or that mirrors that because that was modeled for me. Isn't that wild? And to me, it's even more wild that we can actually become aware of this repetition compulsion, this cycle in us to be attracted to individuals that mirror that dysfunctionality in childhood that was modeled for us. Right? And none of that changes until we become aware of it, until we understand what it actually is. Right? There's such thing as unhealthy love. Oh, there is. Yeah, absolutely. There is. Sadomasochistic, where you're being treated like shit and you identify that as love because in childhood you were treated like shit. In childhood, you were marred and scathed in a way that had you being somebody other than who you were to even fucking receive love, which isn't healthy. So you're just repeating that in adulthood now. If you were to look at your relationship, even your relationships with your friends, right? If your relationships with your friends suck, just look at your childhood. I mean, that's just the reality of it. But now getting beyond the repetition compulsion, the act of feeling the emotions that you never had a safe fucking space to feel earlier on in life because everyone shamed it out of you, right? Actually being with yourself, being by yourself and feeling the fucking feelings. Oh my god, that really fucking sucked. That really fucking hurt. I did not like that. You're allowed to not like it. You deserve healthy love. No matter what it is that you've been through, no matter how fucking cracked and damaged you have been, you deserve healthy love. Repetition compulsion is a real thing. The act of emotionally keeping our childhood alive and adulthood simply because it's comfortable and familiar, simply because that's what we learned. We are shaped so deeply in childhood. So much of what we learn about life, about love, about ourselves, about people, about relationships, childhood, right? And it's wild that through conscious self-awareness in an evolutionary way, we become aware of that. We can become aware of that. And we can be like, oh, wait a second. Holy fuck, look at that. That was terrifying. But I'm so attracted to it. I am. That has been love to me. I've never known anything else. How do I bring myself to do anything else? Well, it's a matter of healing. It's a matter of healing those parts that have been fucked up and damaged, right? And then consciously choosing otherwise, right? If in childhood, metaphorically, it doesn't even have to be metaphorical. If in childhood you had the ever living shit kicked out of you physically, right? You're going to seek people in adulthood that do the same thing, right? Abusive childhoods result in abusive adulthoods until that's healed, right? But not only that, let's go even beyond everything that you've been spoon fed through this disgusting fucking moldy ass spoon that you were taught to believe that's what you deserve. Let's look into the other things too. How have you been taught to see yourself? Have you been taught to see yourself as a worthless piece of shit that doesn't deserve anything good? How wild is it that through getting outside of repetition compulsion, because that in and of itself is no different, right? How you see yourself is also repetition compulsion. Every single day you're choosing to see yourself in a certain way. You are. And you can also choose to change that. How wild is that? How you see yourself is how you become. If you don't see yourself in a positive, loving light, nobody else is going to see you in a positive, loving light. If you see yourself as a worthless piece of shit, you are most definitely going to attract people that see you the same way, and you're going to be treated that way. If you instead decide to see those people, not as good or bad or right or wrong, they're unhealthy for sure, but cut them off, block them, go no contact, goodbye, right? How do you want to see yourself? Because how you see yourself dictates how you live your life. And it also dictates how other people see you, right? So let's actually slow this machine, this unconscious and subconscious machine down, and actually look at it for what it is and take it off the tracks and be like, oh my God, you are headed for fucking mayhem. How do we switch this up? We need to change some things around here, restructure the skeleton, um, upload a new software program. Wow, right? Slow way down. It doesn't matter how you've been treated. That's not to invalidate anybody, but understand that as you evolve, what you didn't understand, what you didn't see in childhood, it doesn't have to continue into adulthood. You can transform. You can become aware of yourself through different forms of meditation. You can become aware of your patterns. You can become aware of how you hold relationships. You can become aware of everything. You can become aware of, I mean, the sky's the limit. Like, and obviously there's no ceiling there. Like, what do you want for yourself? This is an important question to ask yourself. Repetition compulsion is a real thing. If your life sucks now, it's very likely because you did not have a healthy childhood. You were probably raised in survival. I don't know you better than you know yourself, but what I do know is that repetition compulsion is a real thing, and if your childhood was a fucking shit show, it's likely that that's why your adulthood looks the way that it does, but it doesn't have to continue that way. And I'm not here to change you. That's not my job. I'm just here to look at the very reality of repetition compulsion and how we unconsciously and subconsciously emotionally keep our childhood alive in adulthood, and we attract unhealthy individuals that just remind us of what we're not worthy of, or what we believe we're not worthy of based on our childhood and everything, right? It's so fascinating. And so just to give some context and everything, not to go into any deep stuff in my life because that's a boundary matter, um, but I've really been looking at the things that I've done throughout my entire life, and I've been realizing that a lot of things have just been based on repetition, compulsion, and comfort and familiarity in terms of emotional dynamics from childhood. And I'm realizing it's also like Neo waking up from the Matrix, and it's like, wait a second, do I actually even want to do any of these things? Do I have any interest in keeping these things alive? Have I just been doing them because they're comfortable and familiar and they remind me of the same emotional dynamic from childhood, right? And it's not good or bad or right or wrong. You can do whatever you want to. What I just said is actually the defining moment of stepping outside of repetition compulsion, because we do all have free human agency, no matter how fucked up we've been, earlier on in life, no matter how enmeshed we've been, no matter how manipulated we've been, no matter how much we've been molded into somebody who has a very hard time seeing their own individual autonomy, you know, boundaries of individuality. Who am I? Who are you? How much have you actually taken the time to dive into your own sense of self that is separate from everything that you've learned growing up? Right? You can throw all of that into question. You can throw it under the microscope. Oh my God, look at that. Look at all the holy shit. And then if you choose that you want to change things, you have individual autonomy. Nobody on the face of this fucking planet, doesn't matter who they are or what kind of power they've tried to get you to believe they have over you, nobody gets to tell you what the fuck you do with your life. What do you actually want? Who actually are you? Do you actually want to get up and do this or that? Or are you just used to it? Are you just on autopilot? There's a fascinating ocean and universe of depth to explore in yourself. And it's a wild journey. It really is.